We come to Berlin, we American presidents, because it's our duty to speak in this place of freedom. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Welcome to the Fidelis Leadership Podcast, a place of learning for those who aspire to leadership excellence. Here's our host, Mike Etor.
Alex Castro is the CEO of M Corp and has helped clients deliver complex corporate strategies for the last 20 years. Alex finds new approaches to serving and building companies by identifying their operational vulnerabilities and helping leadership teams correct them. He is also the author of a best-selling book, and we're going to discuss the book during today's conversation. And I am both grateful and excited that Alex has agreed to share some of his wisdom and insights with us today. Alex, welcome to the Fidelis Leadership Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's really a pleasure.
Well, we're grateful to have you. The audience will certainly be interested in what you got to say. We haven't had anyone on the podcast so far with your specific field of expertise. I mean, obviously you have a broad range of experience and all that, but we're particularly interested in hearing what your company does and what problems it helps solve with clients. Before we get into that, tell us a little bit more. What else do we need to know about Alex?
You know, I come from immigrant parents. I had to work through a lot of different learning curves early in my career that make things difficult. And I can tell you a story in a little bit. I think I think it best fits your agenda, but it kind of helps connect some dots for, I think, your listener to really kind of see where the genesis of our approaches come from.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's segue into your company. I know you have some proprietary processes and all that. What problems do you help, or what capabilities do you help your clients acquire and integrate into their business operations?
Yeah, Mike, it's a great question. The thing that fundamentally we see in the industry, and I'm sure that you've seen it in many of your careers and experiences, is that good ideas struggle to go through the execution process and become reality, right? And that drop off in innovation, the drop off in finding a better path, is what, in essence, in many ways, cripples a company's capability to grow, right? To take that leap in terms of getting into that $7,500 million, $150 million recurring revenue stream. And the things that prevent us from meeting those milestones of growth are things that are correctable. And it's knowing how to see them that allow you to then correct them and move on. And really what we anchor in a lot of our method is around decision bias. This is the decisions that happen very early on in the strat planning process, in that transition to execution, that really hinder progress.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Makes total sense to me. I got to ask you before we get going, timeless question. I ask this of everybody on the podcast. Timeless question: leaders, born or made?
I think that you are born with an innate desire to lead, and you are crafted into the capability of doing it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think don't let me put words in your mouth. I think what you're saying is some people are born with an aptitude to lead, maybe even more so than others, but both of that segment of the population can be trained, and they have to learn how to actually artfully apply the science of leadership. Is that fair?
Yeah. I mean, leading is not about, hey, do what I say. Mm-hmm. And leading is not about, hey, I'm going over here, just follow me. Right. Leading is about creating unit continuity that allows you to move together into a direction. Yeah. And that takes time to learn. That's hard because I'll tell you very simply, I'm the type of person who, I move at a pace that drives my team's bananas. And I'm constantly having to get the feedback from my folks. And it's like, Alex, you're moving too fast. You're going too fast. And there are times that I say, okay, I need to really take that in, take that feedback to heart and adjust. And there are other times that I'm like, yeah, that's not a me problem. That's a you problem. So let's figure out how to help you get to that velocity in movement, because the market's not waiting for us. The customer's not waiting for us. Yeah. So we need to move now, not when you are comfortable. And, I was listening to an interview with the CRO with Stripe, and he said, look, if you're making a decision and you're asked the question, are you comfortable with the decision right now? And the person says, yeah, I'm pretty comfortable. You've taken too long to make that decision.
Yeah. That's well put. Somebody told me one time, really relative to what you just said, and what he said was, Mike, as a senior guy, if I don't feel like I'm on a racetrack and on two wheels going around the corner most of the time, I'm probably playing it too safe and too slow to keep up with, much less ahead, beat our competition. So I love it. And that's a great segue into my next question, Alex. You have worked with, observed, coached, mentored countless leaders, top level leaders. And I want to ask you a question. Now let's take the top slice of this top slice leader segment. Do you, off the top of your head, can you name any traits and habits that seem to be common among the very best of the best leaders?
Yeah. I mean, fundamentally, the best leaders lead with values. Culture is their number one priority. Yeah. And by building culture and leading with values and making those values clear to the team, that sets the tone for how you move forward.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. That's a great answer. Well, listen, I know that you recently published a book titled Measure, Execute, and Win: Avoiding Strategic Initiative Debacles and Knowing What Your Business Can and Can't Do Well. Love the title. I can't wait to read it. I have not read it yet, Alex. Look forward to doing that. Can you tell us, first of all, what prompted you to write the book, and can you share some of its main messages with us?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, what drove it is that, in working with clients globally, you walk into so many situations where you can see their potential. You can really see the potential for them to do something innovative, great, that really is, you want to be part of. And what tends to happen is that most entities really struggle with translating strategy into action. Like, how do you take a strategic initiative that is intended to deliver a certain value to customers or your shareholders and map that into an end-to-end roadmap that shows you the sequencing of how things need to go and whatever. People jump from idea to action, thinking that it's just going to sort itself out. And that the data, 20 years of research data tells us that 80% of that type of approach fails, or it doesn't generate the result that's needed. So you're consuming resources, you're demoralizing staff, you're showing inconsistency to your customers, you're creating vulnerabilities to yourself as a business, to your competitors, and you're taking too long to get to market. You're missing opportunities that you would have been better suited to deliver on, because you had this one thing you were stuck on potentially, and it was a great idea, but you had no chance to actually execute it well. And we see this over and over and over again. And in the day where the market acceleration is very aggressive and expectations are very high, right? We are all consumers. You and I, your listener, we're all consumers, and we expect certain levels of responsiveness from the companies we buy from or do business with. And when they don't meet that, our judgment is immediate in that context.
Yeah.
And so you can sit behind that door and say, well, we've got this problem and we're trying to do this and, and all these, different reasons. But at the end of the day, the market's walked away from you and nobody's waiting for you to catch up, right? You've got to figure it out.
Yeah. I love that answer and that statement. I want to color really the interview, maybe even shape it a little bit. I work with client companies that are 10 million, entrepreneurs, 10 million, but they want to be 50 million 3 years from now, 80 million. I'm working with a company right now that's about 85 million in revenue. They see opportunity. They think they can be 300 million in about 3 or 4 years. And many of the companies I work with, all of them are led by very bright people. And they're bombarded with that dichotomy of, you got to plan, but then, we got to move, we got to, first mover advantage, we got to get out there and all of that. And what I have found both through my Marine Corps career, where the stakes are obviously high, and then my business career where they're higher, but nobody's dying, so to speak, is that some executives have not been taught planning. They've not been taught that linkage between the strategic versus the tactical execution. They've not done that. And because of their title and their authority, they can say, we don't need it. We just need to go do it. We'll figure it out. And by attempting to go fast, so to speak, they almost inevitably paralyze the company in one way or the other. So it's either, you either plan up front or you'll plan during a rescue mission, and then it gets really tough, as you know. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, once we are now in a business climate that is this is the baseline, that there is no recovery time. There is no rescue mission. There is no anything. There's either you do it or you abandon it. There's no coming back around to it and trying to figure out how to get it to go right. So you're either going to get alignment on what you need to do, and you're going to have the majority of your sort of ducks in a row in your execution process, or you're going to spend a bunch of time and money that's not going to generate value. And really where we see the crippling effect there is, look at the job market right now. There are people attritioning out of entities that are not really delivering success. You can look at this from different contexts, right? You can look at it from the sense it's like, am I bringing product services to market that are pretty spot on, effectively meeting the strategic growth target? And I'm doing it consistently well, right? People say, well, we just did this other project and we were great, and so we should be able to do this now. Previous success does not determine future success in any way, shape, or form. Every condition is different. And so being able to consistently bring products to market, services to market, deliver value to market, and sort of customer value is the central theme, is very critical in that. And if you're not able to repeat that process, or at least understand what it takes to get there, you're going to continue to really, I always say it's like you just take a handful of darts and throw it at the wall and hope something hits the dartboard, right? And so that's not an effective rollout process. So it's a very demoralizing thing as a leader. Now, what you have to also take to, right, in this job market element, is the reason these people are leaving larger companies and larger entities is because there's been this absurd concept of fail fast, right? Well, I don't know about you, but for me, I was a Division I collegiate athlete. I've been competitive my entire life. I run a company, right? I hate losing more than I like winning. And if I'm going to be consistently led by somebody who just keeps throwing me into situations where I cannot win or see it all the way through, you are just going to really demoralize a team into apathy. You're going to lose the really bright people, right? Netflix has an entire culture model that I would encourage the listener to go and take a peek at in terms of how to do that. And the reality is you have to figure out a way to connect strategy to execution, to value creation for the customer and your employee base, right? Because people like to win. People need to win. They need to see the progression forward, not only in the company that they have associated themselves with, but in their own daily career elements. And if you can align those elements, winning begets winning, right? There's a book on the market, called The Winner Effect. And in essence, it shows that, they went to the most fundamental level. They took two mice, right? They took a mouse and they put it in a little arena with an inferior mouse, and that mouse beat that inferior mouse. Then they took they took that mouse that won and paired it against an equal competitor, and the winner would always come on top. Right. And they did this over and over and over again as an experiment. And I'm kind of butchering the thing, but I'm trying to. And the reality is that's what happens in business. Winning begets winning. Right. But winning by chance does not drive future more winning. There has to be a structured repeatability to it, and understanding, and a data-driven decision model that allows you as a leader to really be able to see, this is an amazing idea. We're not going to get there. And I'm not going to put my team, my customers, and myself through this process on the hope we might get onto the other side.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I love that. There's a saying in the military, I don't know if you've heard this, but it's called hope is not a battlefield strategy.
Yes.
So when you're planning a battle, you're telling troops we're getting ready to go this, and we're going to have artillery and air support. And, I hope it's enough. I mean, that troops don't want to hear that.
No.
They want to hear we're going to bombard the hell out of these guys. We'll be surprised if anybody's alive by the time we get to the objective and all that. So it really resonates with me, everything that you're saying. I know you've been quoted in the past as saying, and you've already touched on this, that companies need to focus more on execution and less on strategy. And then you've also stated, because I researched you've also stated, Alex, that having a master plan is not enough for company growth. And I think these questions are somewhat related to each other. So I wanted to ask them both at the same time and hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can relate to my own company. It's like, how are we going to exceed, 150 million, 100 million in annual recurring revenues, right? And so I have a master plan that I share as a vision with my teams and my leadership. But there is a whole heck of a lot of questions that happen, between the plan and, okay, well, how are we supposed to do that? And I think that the thing that really gets in the way of a lot of leaders is that they invest so much in the idea, in the sense of that validation, right? They run the pro forma models. You take a look at all of the permutations. What's the competitive analysis? How are we going to go to market? All of those different elements associated with your idea. But very little attention has been paid traditionally on how are you going to do it? Like it's not about taking a book of a strategy and throwing it over a wall and hoping it lands on the right project manager's desk for them to then execute that out. Yeah. That is your, to your point, the strategy of hope. Execution is in essence the largest point of inflection in a company's ability to really meet its vision. And being able to align execution to the strategy in a way, and understanding where are the blind spots that we have, and getting there and seeing those before you move allows you to then adjust. And then everything else then becomes a smaller correction in process. So, I think you can relate to this, the listener can relate to this, is the fact that how many times have you been in a situation where you are beginning to execute a strategy, do a project, whatever it may be, and your main project then turns into your main project and 4 sub projects, So with the same budget and the same timeline, and the resources aren't changing, and the pressure is mounting, and the expectations are mounting, and you have to show up and you have to respond to a board, to a leader, whatever it may be. And this happens constantly. This is what I call the splintering effect. And that splintering can be prevented, but you have to really want to take that, that short process on the front end, right? For us, measuring this content takes us about 3-4 days. Most entities take 3, 4, 5 months to do it. Nobody has that time anymore, right? And then you need to understand what you're getting, so it's very eyes wide open going into the process.
Yeah, I love it. The term I use, I'm sure you've heard of it as well, when you talk about this splintering effect, is scope creep. And I've been there and done it. I've starred in that show. We're going to do project A. The next thing you know, there's some great other ideas going on. Next thing you know, you got B, C, and D. Mm-hmm. And my solution to that was, my answer to that personally, and what I teach people, I'd like to hear your thoughts on it, is you have to defend that original scope. And I use the analogy of a stove with 4 burners on it. If that project A takes up all 4 of your burners and people are asking for more meals, so to speak, something's got to come off the stove, or they got to buy you a new stove and a couple of more cooks, because you can't squeeze 5 simultaneous projects out of a team that might be able to do 2 effectively at best. I think we're saying pretty much the same thing here. Any final thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's in the same space. So I'll expand on that a little bit if you're okay with it. Is
sure.
More in the context that you go into a project and a lot of your dependencies in terms of moving forward are based on assumptions that you have made. And the assumptions are that the business knows its business very well, that resources are available to be siphoned off from that business unit to go and create that product or integrate an acquisition or deploy AI or machine learning, that people know how, to your point, know how to lead, that the initiative itself is core to the strategy, that there's alignment with the marketplace, right? Those assumptions, when you initiate the execution of a strategy, those are the assumptions that start to cripple progress, because suddenly you go and you say, hey, look, I need Joanne and I need Bob to come off, working on their day job and help us develop this new product, open this new market, integrate this acquisition, whatever it may be. And the leader of that unit is like, no, you're here to do all of that so that they can just keep doing their day job. And and you're looking at them and saying, that's not how this works, right? So now you have subject matter expertise that you have limited access to. Yeah. You're getting noodles through a straw, right? And the progress is slow, and you're now filling the gaps with assumptions because you got to keep this train moving. Inevitably, 8 out of 9 out of 10 times, those assumptions are off in some way or just flat out wrong. And you're skewed, 10 degrees left, and you're already halfway down the track. And so the thing that happens is that it's those basic elements in there, right? Scope creep is definitely a major issue. What I would also add on to that, or compounding that, is that the assumptions that your people know what they're doing, that the resources are available, that the leadership is there, that the alignments are there, that the technology know-how is there, that the vision is clear, that the capacity of the business to absorb this new direction is there, and it has enough capacity to deal with the vision of what you're doing. Those are the things that start to derail you. And that's what we tend to talk to, is how do you create that tight alignment so execution can happen twice as fast rather than 3 times as slow, right?
Yeah, I love that. I've lived that as a CIO, big tech group, 180 people in my department, and a major a major software implementation failed. The leader that was in charge of that was caught fudging progress reports, and it was just a mess.
Yep.
And I took over and installed somebody new, Alex, and I did something very unpopular. I told the other C-level executives that I needed some money to bring in some consultants to review the plan, and most importantly, to see if we had the capacity and the expertise to actually, I use the analogy of building a car. I said, I think we have the expertise to drive the car once delivered. I'm not sure we have the expertise to build that car.
Right.
And sure enough, that's exactly what the external consultants did. We brought in a team that helped us out. And sure enough, with them, we built the car with their help. Couldn't have done it without them. And then we drove it magnificently for the rest of the life, so to speak. It was great. So, boy, you're singing my song, everything. And I know people out there that have experience at the senior levels trying to execute strategy, be it execution and all tactical execution. It's boy, you're singing our song, and it's all fundamental stuff. But it's just like common sense. Common sense is not so common, and fundamental planning and execution is not fundamental to most companies, I find, and I'm sure you've seen it way more than I have. Any thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's step one of it, is understanding the alignment of capability to idea, right? Is in the sense of do we have, to your point, right? Do we have the horsepower to do this? The other part of it is that, have we really understood the sequence of events that have to happen in order for this strategy to be realized? And more often than not, again, what I'm seeing now is an active trend is that stovepiping initiatives and thinking, look, if I go and buy this technology, or if I go and, buy this company, or if I, it's still the silver bullet thinking kind of a thing, right? If I go buy this very popular platform, it's going to solve all my problems for me. And that stovepipe context is really what I call legacy thinking, right? People today, if you have a technology group or you have a deep technology base, there's this stuff that's going around. It's called, how much technology debt do you have within the business, right? In the sense of how much are you carrying in terms of these old systems and old processes. The thing that people are turning to is what I call pre-COVID thinking and legacy thinking that says, well, I'm going to take this old system, an old process, an old ERP system or whatever, and I'm going to go and modernize that by replacing it with a newer system. And to me, it's just, you're just repeating the legacy process. You're adding more technical debt, because new technology is 2, 3, 4, 10 times more complicated than the technology that's in place right now. Number one. Number two, the ability to support it isn't there. Number three, you have to re-engineer processes in order to make it work with the new technology. So it's not self-correcting. And how does this totally align with the strategy? Like, does replacing this technology, as an example, actually move the strategic needle forward, right? We call it moving chains, right? It's a football thing, right?
Yeah.
Am I moving chains down the field, right? Or am I just, repeating the same thing over and over and over again, because that's what I'm comfortable with? And the reality that we all have to look at as leaders within our teams is it may be uncomfortable. And in order for us to move our agenda forward at the pace of market demand, customer demand, we're going to have to let go of some of this old thinking, right? Well, I have to, the response is then, but I have to control these things. Well, I don't know about you, but control to me is an illusion. Nobody is ever in control of anything. Right? You think you're in control walking out your front door, and from the moment you step outside, things are beginning to change, and you're reacting. And so the reality is, what can you leverage from either a relationship base, a go-to-market strategy that is more nimble or distributed? How do you take your technology and start to plunk that outside of your enterprise so that you are not having to own this technology debt and carry this ball and chain with you down the field, trying to move chains on your strategy when you're spending 40% of your resources dealing with old technology and then just replacing old technology with new old technology, right? Because the minute you go to deployment today, it's now legacy, because any system is last 2 to 3 years. Anytime you put a strategy in place, you've got maybe a quarter or two before the market has shifted and you have to re-engineer it. You have, 20% of acquisitions produce value for the acquirer, 30% of acquisitions produce no value to the acquirer, and 50% of acquisitions actually devalue the acquirer.
Yeah.
All right. The stats are there. You can't ignore them. You have to start to look at leadership from the context that driving strategy is about also shedding old thinking that you believe can adapt to the next generation of things. So I'll add this one last kind of point to this, because I want to get to the other topics you want to address, is that leaders talk about the gut. Right. Well, my gut is telling me this, and I've done this thing before, and I know how to, right? That's the worst thing you can do. As a leader, right? As a professional, what you are doing is honing the blades of your wood chipper. So as content comes in, you can process it more efficiently. You know how to separate bark from tree. You know how to get rid of the branch and the stump and whatever. It's not the fact that I've cut down 20, oak trees, so I know exactly how to process. Well, the oak trees in this place are not the same as the ones in those places, and so on and so forth, right? So it's not the fact that you are consistently processing the same content. It's that you know how to process content more efficiently. That's what mature leadership brings to the table, is the ability to process information and do something with it. The more we rely on the fact that, I've done this before, has no bearing. And I think that's one of the biggest deficits I'm seeing in leadership today, is that they are relying on pre-COVID thinking, legacy thinking that's going to actually solution something today, where the market said, we need it. You've got 3.5, 4 months to get there, where 4 years ago, maybe you had a year or 18 months.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Well, listen, you have tremendous expertise in the areas of data analysis, leveraging artificial intelligence. And I really want you to talk about those topics, as they are interrelated, Alex. And please assume that most of our listeners, if not the vast majority, know pretty much nothing about it. It's often talked about, but I find, and myself included, our conceptual mastery of these topics is thin at best. I find in most cases. So, a couple of questions, and I think they relate, is why is data and the analysis of data, critical to the execution of strategy? And I would assume that there's some element of measuring and assessing that data in the analysis that's going to help the process. So I know I'm butchering it, but I'll let you talk now.
No, that's great. Look, I think that modern leadership is about recognizing that data is the lifeblood of your business. And making better decisions on a daily basis needs to really be oriented to more data-driven decision-making, rather than gut-made or, some other method, right? It's not about analysis paralysis, right? We've all been in that situation where people say, well, maybe this permutation or that, data can help cut through to the root of it. Now, you have to gather good data, quality data. You have to set a data standard for what you're collecting and how you're collecting it. But you can also buy data today, right? It's not all about owning the process yourself in that context, right? It's about, can I get the information I need so then I can do the analysis and process it and create better outcomes, better decisions around it. And so really, one of the early on things that's really moving right now, which I'm assuming most of your listeners, and even in many categories are starting to hear a lot more about in that sort of AI, ML space, machine learning space, is really robotic process automation, right? In the sense that processes to consolidate data into a single format that removes menial and manual tasks so that you can get through things a lot faster. It could be as simple as having an RPA, what's called an RPA bot, robotic process automation bot, that will take invoices, data from invoices, and scrape that data off the invoices that are emailed to you or sent to you by paper, or even in some electronic form, and consolidate that data and enter it into your ERP so that you don't have somebody keying data over all day long, right? Or you can create chat bots that are effectively taking the place of customer service or some kind of early initiative. But really where we say a lot of that data being very valuable is in the fact that you can start to curate experiences for customers, and you can begin to curate the messaging and how you move a customer through the experience of first touch point to your brand, through to capture, through to now delivery, and then post-delivery, right? Amazon does this incredibly well. Others do it almost as well, but most of us struggle with it. And it's, I think, for a modern leader, a growth company, data is the lifeblood that will begin to drive that insight so that you can understand, what are my capabilities? Where are we weak in market? Where is our capacity to do things? How can I understand the movements within the market and get that insight and analysis? And it's not a $10 million investment, right? It's something that is fundamental to how do I create good, consistent baseline information, data to information. And then how do I run analytics on top of that and start to get some more business intelligence driven outcomes so I can see the better picture. And that data needs to be on a continuum. It has to be in a data stream. This starts to get into a little bit of the techie talk, but it goes from a data stream into a data lake, right? And so you have to make sure that the data lake isn't a closed environment that gets stagnant. You need a data stream that feeds the data lake, that continuously refreshes the content, and also amends existing data so that it's more complete, right? That then allows you to start to do the insight path, right? And that's a 2-hour interview. Right? You produce that. But I think fundamentally, as a modern leader, you need to look at data as the lifeblood of how you're going to make better decisions, better strategic decisions, better actuating decisions, and how you're going to respond to market and consumer need, and customer need, because that tells the story for you. But don't spend half your resources collecting it. That's the other part of it.
Yeah, I love everything you just said. Very enlightening. I actually have a client right now, and one of the executives is a very bright fellow, and he is in the early stages of trying to convince his fellow executives that they must invest in these RPA bots. Yeah. And what he is trying to sell them on is he's given this pretty much the same explanation you are, but he's equating it to how many man hours per year will save the company. And, if his data is correct, it's a compelling argument, a bargain, a bargain at twice the price, as they used to say.
Right. So let's take that example, and I'm going to take it a step further.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So for this individual who's doing this, in this scenario, what I would do is also offer that in moving to robotic process automation, RPA, don't go out and buy software and go buy resources and try to own it and implement it and tune it and try to learn it, right? RPA is exploding right now in the marketplace. The resources are incredibly expensive. You're moving into AI light, right? So what do you need to do? You need to go to somebody and say, I want to do this as a service. Right? I want to go to M Corp, us, right? Or somebody else and say, I want to implement a bot to do a proof of concept to consolidate all of this information, reduce man hours as a task by X amount. This is going to be my benchmark. I want to see the quality metrics that are coming out of RPA. And I want you to buy the software, configure the software, tune the software, host the software, do all of the work, and I'll pay you on a per record basis to produce, right? And we call it a performance partnership model, a PPM. And in our world, the PPM is that next generation of data collection without the overhead, right? I talked about technical debt earlier. So just because there's a new tech out doesn't mean you have to own the tech. You just want the outcome of the tech. So the thing is, for this, in that instance, I would say, go do a POC, right? Come to us, go to somebody, I don't know, and say, look, we want to deploy an RPA bot in month and a half, 2 months. We want it to run for this period of time. We want to do metrics on what's coming back, but I don't want to own any of the implementation. I don't want to own any of the software. I don't want to pay for any services. I want to pay you on a consumption model, which says when I use it, when I get value, you get revenue. And that is the current model that I would say most forward-leaning companies are moving into. The days of I pay and then I hope it works are over. Nobody is interested in this anymore, right? What people want is, it's like Stripe, it's like Snowflake, it's like virtually any other company out there, any platform out there that says, look, until I receive value, I do not exchange money with you. And if this RPA solution is something that others are considering, I would urge you to go to your vendor base, even if coming to M Corp isn't your path, go to your existing vendor and say, look, I want you to do all of this. I'm not going to pay you for any of it until it's in production, it's working, it's producing what I'm seeing, and then I'll pay you on a per record basis. And we'll figure out what that per record cost is. And then we'll run a direct one-to-one metric, because now I'm removing labor hours, which has a quantifiable, right? I can now quantify what does it cost me as a company to process that form or have that individual per record that they are doing. And I can look at the RPA element and say, is it doing it better, faster, cheaper, right? It's the typical triangle: quality, speed, cost, right? You have to pick two. You can't get all three, never. Right? It's fundamental. So am I getting better data faster? Well, it's going to cost me maybe a little bit more, but what else am I gaining out of that process, or whatever combination you want in there? So what I would offer in the leadership consideration and to the listener right now is the fact that this is when I talk about you need to shift out of legacy thinking, in the sense that I'm going to go out and buy software services, own all this kind of thing. That is going to cripple your acceleration to market. You need to learn how to leverage as a service to really get things to produce outcomes for you, that you pay for outcomes, but you don't pay for getting to the outcome, right? Most people, when they go buy a house, they buy a completed house.
Right.
The nightmare is building a house, right? Yeah. And so if we're not doing that in our lives, why are we doing that in our businesses? And so it's a very, basic, a little bit sophomore example, but it just kind of gives it that clarity.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, Alex, what's the temptation for a company to say, no, I'm going to buy it? Do they think that, I can buy it for X amount of dollars? This guy's going to cost me X amount for every record. Is it kind of the lure of a false economy? They actually think they're saving money by buying it and doing it themselves, vice outsourcing and just paying for results?
Yeah. I mean, it's also control. You have, you as a former CIO know this, all too well. I wrestle with this personally in my own business and at times, but I've kind of leaned into it, is the fact that it's like, people have this attitude. It's like, if I let go of this and I outsource this, now I'm dependent on this third-party vendor. Yeah. Right. Well, that's fine. But what is your strategic plan? right? Again, you have to go back to the fundamental of where are you trying to get to and when are you trying to get there? And is investing yourself into this brand new technology stream or process stream or, integrating an acquisition, whatever it may be, is this thing worth the time? Is it going to accelerate me to market, or am I going to be, in a Greco-Roman wrestling match for the next 18 months that's going to distract me from delivering strategy? And what I would offer again is to this individual as an example, go run the model I just described, right? Go out and say, as a service, I want RPA. I want vendor, you pick the software, configure it, tune it, host it, everything. You charge me on a per model or a per record price. Maybe 6 months from now, he's got enough data or she's got enough data that they're looking at it and saying, holy smokes, this is going to help us really do a lot more stuff. We have to embed this into the business. Yeah. What do you know now? Now, number one, you've proven the concept. You didn't pay for any of the heartburn. You've learned how it works. You can make better decisions at more of a reasonable pace around whether this is something you want to own and invest in your business. And then you can make the decision for these things. I'm going to outsource it because it's a short-term solution. For these things that we're going to own, let's say you have a help bot, a chat bot, and you want to own that internally. Maybe that's something you want to keep in the long term, but it's creating these balances of different things. And I would offer that leaders and C-suites need to start to take a look at their book of business, their inventory of how they're running their companies, and understand, what do I truly need to own, or what can I actually buy as a service and have it supply me an outcome rather than me having to buy the thing, right? And so oftentimes when I'm doing a presentation or a talk about this, I put up a slide that has 2 photographs on it, right? I'm saying, look, I'm going to go back to the house thing. I'm building a house. I can go buy land with trees on it and have to go and harvest the trees and mill the wood and transport it and invest in that infrastructure. Or I can just go and buy the lumber and have it delivered to the job site. The problem that most leaders have in their businesses is they're still buying plots of land with trees, cutting them down, harvesting, and investing in that entire infrastructure when the lumber is a phone call away. When you shift in that mindset, you now have acceleration in the business, because you're not stuck in this legacy mindset that I have to own the process. Yeah. I just want the outcome, which is the lumber.
Yeah, I love it. And I'm going to offer something here. And I just was thinking of this as you're talking. Given your and my focus on always going back, what's the strategy? What's the desired outcome? Where are we going? Where do we want to arrive and when? It would make sense. I think what you're saying is pay for speed of acquisition of actionable data that enables you to affect your operations much quicker than acquiring that actionable data if you're essentially cutting down the trees and doing the milling and all of that stuff yourself. So it really does appear to be a false economy. And of course, what you're discussing right now with this automation and RPA, as you know, that is the classic problem in most IT groups, and because people, and you also get, self-interest where people are like, well, I don't want to outsource this. If next thing you know, it's like, well, what's he doing? He used to do this. Now we're outsourcing. We don't need him anymore. So there's a tremendous amount of legacy debt, self-preservation debt. So yeah, I love this, but
it's Moneyball, right? It's like one of my favorite movies is Moneyball.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And there's a scene in the movie where Brad Pitt's looking at one of his scouts, and he says, look, adapt or die. Right. And right now we're in that life cycle, adapt or die, right? You have to make shifts to get from 20 to 100 million, right? Under 20, you're in guerrilla mode, right? You're out there, everybody's covering, everybody's doing multiple tasks, they're shifting around, they're doing whatever it takes to keep things moving, right? You go over 20 million, you're trying to get to 50, you're going to 50 to 80 or 100 million. You need structure, you need discipline, you need teams, you need to build an environment that has the agility you need with structure. And you have to be very careful how much additional overhead you take into the business, because that overhead detracts from forward progress, right? What's the frustration that many people have in moving to a larger company or selling their company to a larger company? Is the bureaucracy, is the pace that those companies work at. And that's debilitating if you are still in that aggressive growth space. And so it's, again, I offer, in the context, it's like, look for those alternative avenues. Do you need to own the ERP? For some people, yes. For some people, it's like, no, I just need to run the transactions through it, right? So it's not always tech focused. It can be other things as well, right? Marketing, sales, go to market. There's an entity called, I think, Chief Outsiders that outsources partial CMO and work, right? Do you need the CMO embedded in the business, or can you take those dollars and spend it in a more effective way?
Yeah. I'm going to ask a very fundamental question for my behalf and my benefit, and those are the listeners, just to clarify. The RPA process you're talking about, technology, is that artificial intelligence, or is it a subset? Is it a element of artificial intelligence?
It's AI light, is what I'd like to say about it. It is in essence, for many people, many businesses, their first foray into AI. Because you're in essence training the bot to respond in certain ways. It's very basic. Like, let's not, I don't want to over promote the degree of AI that we're, this isn't the automated car, right? But when you're having a chatbot session and it's responding to some of your questions, it's AI like, is it clunky? Yeah. But RPA on the backside to consolidate data, clean up information, connect systems that pool information into one centralized data store that is normalized in a way that you can now use it effectively in your business intelligence modeling. RPA does that. That means you don't need to modernize a lot of systems. You just connect them on the back end through RPA, right? Yeah. Should you own the RPA? I don't know. For some people, yes. But I'm going back to the fundamentals, which is how much weight do you need to take on? Because the tech is not getting simpler. Acquisitions are becoming more complex to integrate, right? The data is out. Right. It's product release, go to market, market expansion, back office optimizations, all of those elements, the data is there in terms of understanding the success rates. What are you going to do to bucket? What are you going to do to shift, pivot, move hard in a direction that allows you to realize success without, creating this overhead in the business that is suffocating to its growth?
Yeah, great. Listen, back to artificial intelligence, Alex, and I'm going to ask you to speak to the untutored here.
Sure.
What is artificial intelligence in the context of how it could help companies large and small?
The biggest mistake that most make in implementing AI or machine learning is not understanding the question that they want it to answer. You have to know what question you want answered through your AI and your machine learning, right? It's not a movie, right? It's the reality is that you have to have a question developed, and then you build models to answer the question using data and algorithms and other mechanisms and tools to do that. And the question typically starts with why. Why did the customer not come to the website? Why did the customer abandon the website? Why did the customer not make the purchase? Why did this part of my business go this way or that way? Why? right? And that's the genesis of where you start with good AI implementation. Because machine learning and AI, right, builds on previous experience. And you need to start in a context of understanding what you want it to tell you. Asking it why, a why question is a great place, and then begin to expand from that context. But I'll be very transparent in this and very candid, is that a full, robust AI implementation is a minimum of a $10 million investment and has about a 15% success rate right now. It's getting better. Yeah. It's getting better, right? But it is very new. It is not .NET coding. It is not deploying security. It's not, it doesn't overlap in skill set to any of those other things. It is in and of itself a brand new subject matter function. Like you have to not just understand data and how to collect the data, because the data goes into the AI. Then you have to understand, how does an AI process information? How does it connect the dots quickly, right? And that's, some work we do in the context that, we use what's called swarm intelligence modeling to allow us to take a look at how content from many people is shaped into a direction. It's like watching that swarm of birds. It's looks like it. You're trying to figure out, it's like, how are all the birds moving together? Or the school of fish? How do they all know to move together? Right. That's called swarm intelligence. And so RPA is a good foray into beginning to use AI light, super light, however you want to categorize it, to begin to automate things that it can be done manually, right? And I think that's the one of the best utilizations that can happen right now. For others that are very B2C driven, it's going to be something that they're going to want to embed into a lot of their go to market for their digital touch points with customers, right? So there's a movement that is very active, especially very much driven by the VC community, called product-led growth, PLG. And so PLG is an element that is in essence saying you're going to prop up a product into digital environment, and then people will be drawn to that product, right? So rather than sales-led growth or marketing-led growth, you have product-led growth, right? Where the product is drawing the need. And so if people who are listening to this are funded, I'm sure they're getting, some questions and or pressure to do PLG in some ways. But PLG can be supported through RPA or AI Lite in beginning to help steer that experience, because as a consumer, when you go and interact with a company, you want the self-service, and self-service can be AI driven, AI light driven, right? Because you want to be able to draw that out of the person interacting with you without them ever having to talk to a salesperson or some kind of customer person, that they can have that self-service content and getting information and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Alex, we're just about out of time. I wanted to give you an opportunity again to speak to the untutored. We have leaders listening here, but if you have any final advice for people who may not have heard of this stuff before today, or if they have, they're just reading about it a little bit and all of that. Mm-hmm. Obviously the benefits are beyond a shadow of a doubt. What advice would you give to someone that says, I'd actually like to start learning about this and seeing if I can apply it within my company? Where would you steer them?
What I would really encourage is begin by really taking an inventory of where it is you want to go, what it's going to take to get there in your perception, and then start balancing that out against capability, measuring capacity to do it, and then begin to bring in subject matter expertise that at least can guide you into initial steps of doing some of this more advanced component. Again, modern business is about nimbleness, ability to market, agility to market, the ability to drive product-led growth versus sales-led growth. These things come at a cost, and that cost is offset by reducing, other assets that you have and not investing in those things anymore. And so it's, and as I mentioned on the RPA side, before, it's go to your vendor community and say, look, I am looking to explore this. I want to pay for outcome. I don't want to pay for your process. I don't want to pay for you to learn how to do it for me. I want to pay for, value. You create value, I create revenue for you. Right. And so at that point, you begin to offset that burden and you start to lighten the enterprise a little bit, the business and its nimbleness. Yeah. And then iteratively learn through that process. But, the ones that I see who are still trying to get there's gorilla arms around everything, own everything, have total domain over everything. That's just simply going to limit the ability of your speed to growth, speed to market, and expansion.
Yeah, thank you. Well, listen, I can't let you out of here without asking you the fantasy question that I ask of all guests. If you were able to bring back one leader from the past, spend a day with that person, who would you choose and why?
Wow. That's a great question. I always struggle with that question of like, if you could invite 5 dead people to dinner kind of conversation, right? I would, I would bring a leader who I think really knew how to impart empathy in quite a way. There's a lot of people who have done that in the past and throughout history, and learning from that empathetic capacity to impart empathy, because in leadership you have to be empathetic. Yeah, and it's something that I work on every day. Every day I work on it. And so, I would say it's more of a social leader than a business leader in that context.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Sorry, not to be too specific.
No, I got it. That's fine. Well, listen, I am sure fascinating interview. I appreciate it. And as will the listeners. I'm sure they're going to want to go out and get your book. Where can they find your book, and where can they find you, Alex? I believe you're going to get at least one company reach out, I'm sure. How do they find your book? How do they find Alex?
All right. So the book is on Amazon. It's a Amazon bestseller. You can also find Alex Castro, M Corp on LinkedIn, or you can just go to www.the-mcorp.com as well. So lots of phone numbers and access and email points out there. And even if it's feedback on this conversation, always love to hear from people. So
Well, thank you so much again. I am so appreciative of your investment and time. I don't know if you saw during the interview, I've taken 2 pages of notes. I learned a lot. I'm going to get this turned into a transcript. I'm sure I'll be highlighting it throughout. So thank you. On a selfish level, thank you for educating me. And I'm sure the listeners will agree. And selfishly, would you please come back and take it to another level someday?
Absolutely. Happy to. It's, I love interacting with leaders like yourself who are really pushing to be better. And it helped, having the conversation helps me too, because I have to consolidate my thoughts in a way that makes sense for somebody. So it's always great. So I am truly grateful for this opportunity. So thank you.
Again, thank you, Alex. Be well.
You too.
We hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Please subscribe, rate, review, and recommend to your friends. Please visit our website at fidelisleadership.com and sign up for our leadership newsletter. Until next time, remember the words of the ancient Greek philosopher Pericles.
What you leave behind is not what is engraved in stone monuments, but is woven in the lives of others.